Welcome back to another video, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite wintertime techniques, and that is going to be throwing a crankbait. Yeah, well, that was a solid intro. So first we're going to talk about why a flat-sided crankbait, or why cranking is so effective in the wintertime. And in my mind, it's because if you're just dragging a jig, the fish are already pretty lethargic as it is. I mean, they'll still move around to eat stuff pretty quick, like when they want to, but majority of the time they're very slow, sluggish, lethargic. So if you're dragging a jig slowly by them, like, they've got a lot of friggin' time to sit there, think about it, and decide if they want to eat it or not. So with a crankbait specifically, now you're cutting that reaction time down. I mean, everybody knows cranking, or if you're reeling fast, or if you're throwing a moving bait, yes, reaction time, you cut it down a lot. So that gives, and what I mean by cutting the reaction time down is, with that jig, you're dragging it slow, they've got a lot of time to watch that sucker and figure out if it's real or not. But with a crankbait, when you're going right past them, the reaction time has all of a sudden been cut down to mere seconds, if not half a second, millisecond, that kind of deal. So granted, you're not going to catch every fish you reel it by, but it triggers that reaction strike a lot quicker than you just hopping a jig, or dragging the jig, or dragging a shaky head, dragging a drop shot, that kind of deal, because you're moving it so much slower with those presentations as opposed to a crankbait coming right by them really quick. So the next point I want to make is why you should be throwing a flat side style crankbait. So everybody loves their big old 300 DD styles, C20, C15, those big wide bodies. They have a pretty wide, wide roll to them. But when the water gets colder, the shad aren't as erratic. Their movements aren't as all over the place. Their movements aren't as all over the place. They're a lot tighter. So by you throwing a thinner crankbait, your wobble is going to be a lot tighter too. And in my experience, that triggers a lot more bites. Now, necessarily, that's my theory on it, is the tighter wobble is mimicking the movements of what the bait fish and the forage are going to be doing underwater, because it's colder, they're moving a heck of a lot, everything's moving slower. Now, that kind of discounts the theory of burning it by them and they just snatch it, but it'll just be a lot more natural, in my opinion, having a tighter wobbling bait coming through the water, because if you're throwing that big old 2.5 square bill style or big old body crankbait, those roll off and do a lot more erratic deflections. So by having something more finesse and more skinny like this, it's just going to match what the forage is doing underwater, whether it's crawfish, shad, whatever it is that you're trying to mimic down there. Now, color selection in these colder months, late November, December, January, February, you just can't seem to beat a red. I've got a couple different craw styles here. This one's a Jungle Rose F4. And then this one's same bait, but this is in Milliken Craw. So you've got two different reds here. This one's a little bit more matte. So like on your cloudy days, this is going to be what I'm going with. Even sunny days you can catch them, but typically when it's cloudy, you want more matte colors, because not much is, nothing is as reflective underneath the water, because it's not sunny. There's no beams of light to reflect off the bait. So not that you can't catch fish in both scenarios with these, but I'm going to go with this guy on a more cloudy day, and then this guy on a more sunny day. And then also depending on the watercolor too, like if I got a little bit more dinge to it, I'm going to pull out this guy just because it's a little bit brighter red. This is a little bit duller red. And if it's even dirtier, I'll go to a Boiler Craw, which is a bright orangish yellow red mix. And then if you're getting into super clear water and you happen to see that the crawfish aren't really that red, and you want something a little more natural, you've got this one. I don't know what the name of this color is, but for super clear water, this can definitely be a killer right here, just because it's very natural, will blend in a lot better. And I mean, those crawfish, they wouldn't survive as long as they do if they didn't blend in with their habitat. So And very rarely this time of year will I throw a shad pattern. It's just I don't, from November, December, January, February, I just don't catch a lot of fish on shad color crankbaits in particular. Now jerkbaits, they'll tear them up. So I'm throwing shad style jerkbaits, but then my crankbaits are pretty much all going to be those red/craw style imitators. Now we're gonna talk about the places that you should be kind of targeting with these. Places that I look for are going to be places where the fish can move up and down in the water column. I mean, you hear it all the time about wintertime fishing where fish can just move vertically based on the pressure, the conditions, whether it's sunny, cloudy, they can move up and down in the water column real quick and still be next to structure. So great places to target are creek channel swings, especially ones that swing next to the bank, because what that does for the fish is when you have a creek channel that swings right up next to a bank, it creates a lot steeper of an angle. So it's more vertical for them. So they can move up and down that. They can move up in the water column. When it's sunnier, the top half's a little warmer. If they want to hunker down because the pressure's high or whatever, they can suck back down closer to the bottom. And that's going to determine what depth crankbait you're throwing and all that good stuff. So 9 times out of 10, you're always going to be able to catch them on a square bill style like this from November, December, January, February. Sometimes I'll back off and throw a little bit deeper diving crankbait, like a curve that gets down a little bit deeper. But you just kind of got to feel it out on the particular day you're out there on the water. Typically on those sunny days, the further into the day you get, the more the fish will kind of push up to that shallower depth range, just because that is getting warmed up by the sun, and obviously 10 feet down in the water column is not really getting warmed by the sun. And next is going to be rod selection, really. So a lot of my crankbaits that I throw, I mean, pretty much 95% of the time I have almost all glass cranking rods, and I like that just because, especially in the wintertime, the fish's mouths are a lot harder. So once you do penetrate it, I mean, it kind of is a little counterintuitive. A softer rod's not be able to drive the hooks in as easy, but it's a crankbait, and those thinner wire trebles are fairly easy to penetrate. But what that does is having that softer rod, like when the fish, I mean, yes, they're lethargic, but when you hook them, sometimes they get really pissed off and start jumping and whatever. So by having that softer rod, it's really going to help you keep those fish pinned a lot better, because it's going to be able to load and unload with what the fish is doing. And that is exactly why I like to throw glass rods. And because it's a little bit slower reaction time. Like when you feel that initial bite, you're pulling, and it's to break it down in a seconds or time frame. If you're throwing a fast action rod like this guy, this is a 7.7 heavy, so not an ideal cranking rod. You bend it and you're hitting backbone pretty quick. But with a glass rod, it's gonna bend a lot farther, and probably down to your, I don't know what guide this is, but instead of it shutting off into backbone at guide like 4 or 5 or 3 or 4, it's gonna shut off into backbone at like somewhere down here, down the rod. So that's just gonna give you more time for the fish to really get that bait and make sure that you don't just rip it away from them and stuff like that. And also when you have fish skin hooked, if you have a stiff rod with these thinner wire trebles, the stiffer rod is going to rip that thinner wire out really easily compared to if you have a soft rod and you just got them skin hooked because that fish barely swatted at your bait. That glass rod is going to be able to land those fish for you a lot more often than having some faster action rod. So glass rods, I'm typically throwing anywhere from a 7.2 to a 7.6. Just depending if I'm trying to pitch close to targets, I'll do that 7.2, 7 foot length, just because shorter rods are definitely way more accurate. And then if I'm just covering water, long bombing down a bank, down a stretch of riprap, down a creek channel, down whatever, I just need to cover water, that's when I'll go to a 7.6, just because casting distance is increased with a lot less effort. And yeah, so that's basically it there. But pretty much 95% of the time I'm throwing a glass rod. I have one rod one cranking rod that's a graphite, and it seems to do pretty well with alongside the glass rods, but it's also a more moderate bend, so it doesn't shut off into backbone super fast. So that is probably the biggest tip cranking that I can give anybody, is use a slower action rod, whether it's a mod fast or a moderate, just because whether you get the fish skin hooked, they need more time to eat it, and the colder water, it will catch you more fish, land you more fish. Just all around, glass rods are going to be a lot better. And the argument there, or the devil's advocate there, is that you can't feel as much with glass, and they're generally a little bit heavier of a rod, but I think the landing percentage goes way up. The amount of bites that you actually lean into and don't just rip it out of their mouth goes way up. So back to some of the places I like to throw them. So like we said, vertical structure or vertical banks will definitely be a lot more prone to holding fish this time of year, just so, like I said before, they can move up and down the water column really easily. But aside from vertical banks, I mean, flats next to adjacent to really deep water, steep drop-offs are good places, because they can slide up on the flat and feed. They can slide up on the flat and warm themselves up in the shallower water. So deep water adjacent to flats is also a really good place to look. I mean, typically they're not going to be much in the back thirds. There'll be a few around channel swings, vertical structure like that. But the majority of my time this time of year is spent more main lake, because that's generally on a lot of the lakes around here. That's where most of the deep water access is. And the more you get into the backs of pockets, that kind of goes away and it gets shallower and stuff. But if you've got like a little ditch, a little drain, and the wind's blowing right into it, that would be a prime example of when you kind of want to check the backs of some places. If there's wind blowing straight down the pipe of it, pushing bait, pushing forage into the back of it for the fish to feed. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for this video. I'm trying to mix a few more of these in here for y'all, just tip-based stuff, just to help y'all catch more fish. I will keep the fishing videos coming. I'm going out this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, we're going to go bass fish. Sunday, and then Monday, we're going to go crappie fish, because I also run a guide service, so I'm trying to stay on some fish, generate some trips there for myself and my business. But if y'all like this style of content, let me know in the comments. If there's things that y'all think I can tweak about any of my videos or any of this style of content, let me know as well. I'm always open to learn and try new things, so never afraid to change it up. But thank y'all for watching this video, and we will see y'all in the next one. And hopefully y'all are catching a bunch of fish where you're at.